Warning: do not watch on an empty stomach and make sure your fridge is well stocked. In this battle cooking manhwa, warriors trade swords for spatulas and fight using gourmet skills. If you're into action food webtoons with intense kitchen duels, you're in for a feast. Let the food fight begin.
Once the gray-furred, charming cat entered the restaurant and handed over the package to Sungwoo. It politely asked, "May I take a seat?" With permission granted, it quickly hopped onto a chair and began licking its paw just like any playful cat. For those who may not know, this special breed called erupos resembles a common cat in appearance and habits, yet possesses remarkable intelligence. Notably, they have more taste buds than humans, which makes them excellent chefs. Their superior sense of smell and hearing also surpasses human limits, and they genuinely enjoy caring for others. Wow, amazing, right? They can be janitors, medics, and even treasure hunters, making them indispensable companions for warriors. But there's one frightening characteristic about the erupos, and that is, they're over-the-top care, to the point that they often turn once strong warriors into lazy pigs. Spoiled slobs who just lie around with their bellies up, literally. That's why they've earned the nickname, the cats that destroy warriors. The erupos' adorable appearance also fuels competition over which one has the best or cutest erupos. This was a sore spot for Sungwoo, especially since everyone around him had an erupos companion, while he did not. He used to cry in despair, wishing, practically begging, the goddess for an erupos since everyone else had one except him. The goddess he prayed to was none other than Gaia, who deeply cares about everyone, except Sungwoo, apparently, to the point that he once nearly gave Gaia a one-way ticket to Hades, out of frustration, making her cry in apology. Back to reality, Sungwoo shot the erupos a disgruntled look as he recalled that past trauma. But quickly regaining his composure, he asked, "Did Rentano order pudding slim? But why would they send an erupos? I'm just a restaurant owner. If fur goes flying everywhere, how am I supposed to keep the place running?" The charming gray cat promptly stood on the table, placing its front paws on the surface, and said, "My fur doesn't shed at all. Go ahead, try pulling it." Sure enough, when Sungwoo tried tugging, not a single strand came loose. Sungwoo was surprised, petting the cat as he asked, "So how did you get here?" The gray erupos proudly crossed its paws like a human and replied confidently, "I defeated a god to get here." Hearing this, Sungwoo nearly fell over in shock, exclaiming, "What?" With a smug grin, the gray-furred erupos scratched its chin with its paw, recounting how it had approached the cat god to request permission to become an assistant for a warrior. Despite putting on its cutest face, it was still rejected. Heartbroken, it slumped over and began to cry. The cat god explained, "You're dangerous. I can't even tell how dangerous you are, so I can't let you go." With a touch of arrogance, the erupos had replied, "That's because I'm super cool. Compared to other species, I'm way more impressive." To clarify, this erupos was of the battle-oriented type, not the usual support type. It was a rare breed within its species. Faced with such self-assuredness, the cat god could only sigh, thinking, "I have to kick this brat out of here. If it stays, it'll only get even more cocky. And anyway, if I don't let it go, it'll probably just escape to find a warrior anyway." While the cat god pondered, our cute, mouse-gray erupos sat weeping in the forest, lamenting its fate and wondering why it couldn't find a warrior. Then, a butterfly delicately landed on a flower before fluttering back into the sky. Watching this, a sudden thought sparked within erupos. It realized that the problem wasn't with the warriors, but with itself and its own lack of abilities. That's when erupos decided it needed to improve itself. With eyes blazing with determination, it understood the path it had to take. It started training itself relentlessly, practicing martial arts, honing its battle skills, reading, and studying like a scholar. It trained non-stop to become a warrior and a scholar, skilled in everything from combat to cleaning and cooking. Determined to become a super cat capable of anything, it threw itself into rigorous training day and night. Back to the present in the warrior's restaurant, Sungwoo was sweating nervously after hearing the story and asked, "So, after all that training, you attacked and defeated the cat god?" Proudly, erupos replied, "That's right. After defeating the cat god, I gained my freedom and could go find a warrior for myself. Hearing this, Sungwoo broke out in a cold sweat, thinking, what kind of creature is this? Meanwhile, the Erupos continued boasting of its triumphs, demonstrating a few battle moves with its front paw. Sungwoo, bewildered by why Renato would send him such a monster-like creature, hesitantly said, actually, I'm retired, no longer a warrior, so I don't really need an assistant. In response, Erupos immediately put on an irresistibly adorable face. As a devoted cat lover, Sungwoo couldn't resist, so with a light cough, he offered, well, if you're interested in working here, I could hire you as an employee. The moment it heard this, Erupos leapt up in joy, bowed deeply with utmost politeness, and said, please take care of me from now on. Both sides were happy with the arrangement. After a bit of thought, Sungwoo chose a name for the cat, gently patted its head, and said, do your best from now on, Nabi. And so, Nabi officially became a team member of the Warriors Restaurant. A true super employee. But there's no joy in life that lasts forever. From afar, two figures were silently watching the soon-to-open restaurant. They were investigating the new establishment that had suddenly appeared. One dedicated to serving warriors, and deemed it an enemy that had to be taken down. With an imposing air, the two began approaching, ready to confront the Warriors Restaurant. Let me introduce you to two newly arrived characters. Restaurant owner Lejong, Park Dal-soo, and cafe owner Vane, Otae Sik. Both men stood at the entrance of the Warriors Restaurant, brimming with confidence. After a moment of observation, they began to speak. A restaurant serving coffee too. Huh? Park Dal-soo remarked sternly. Quite cocky, don't you think? Like they're trying to show us up, replied Otae Sik. The two of them whispered to each other, should we use first order to flip this place upside down? Just like that cafe before? So, who are these bold characters who've appeared out of nowhere? However, they suddenly noticed two congratulatory wreaths placed next to the restaurant door. Out of curiosity, they stepped closer to see that one was from Baek Hang-hyuk, and the other from Min Ok-fi. The notes read, please make only delicious food, and, congratulations on your grand opening. Seeing the names of two of the most influential figures in the area, the two owners were immediately taken aback, their eyes widening in shock. They broke into a cold sweat as they realized that the owner of this restaurant seemed to have connections with some very important people. But they didn't back down. After a moment of acting angry, they exchanged a sharp look and made a bold decision. This restaurant is irritating. Let's go prepare and come back later. Wow, they're pretty brave, aren't they? Planning to return well prepared for a showdown. The moment they made this declaration, the two scurried off as fast as they could. Quite the talkers. However, they'd barely taken a few steps before they suddenly felt a light tap on their backs from two cat paws. Turning around, they saw an adorably cute cat before them. It was Nabi, who cheerfully asked, are you two customers? The two were dumbfounded to see a talking cat. And before they could respond, Nabi went on, eyes bright with excitement, if you're customers, please come in. Without waiting for a reply, he grabbed both men by the collars and pulled them right inside the restaurant. With a greeting style like this, no customer would ever escape. Once seated, the two began whispering again, one guessing it was some kind of monster, the other suggesting it was a well-trained beast man. Meanwhile, Nabi was positively thrilled to have customers to serve, rushing off to bring them 2 glasses of water. However, the two men, being true to themselves, went back to scheming about how to ruin and slander the restaurant. The shorter, rounder owner ran his finger across the table, looking for dust, but to his disappointment, he found not a single speck, not even a stray cat hair. The place was spotless, practically sparkling. As Nabi set the glasses of water in front of them, he added cheerily, I don't shed. The two immediately grew curious, patting Nabi's fur to see why it didn't shed, though they were still puzzled by how the place was kept so unbelievably clean. They wondered, do they use a cleaning service? Nabi grinned and answered, I do all the cleaning myself. Hearing this, the two men grew jealous, slumping onto the table, and sighed, I wish we had a cat like this. Before the jealousy could settle in, Nabi plopped the menu onto the table and encouraged, please, take a look and order. The two immediately began whispering again, shifting to Plan B, since Plan A had failed. They requested to order today's special. To give you some context, the special menu in a 5-star Michelin restaurant is usually a dish directly prepared by the head chef. It's not just expensive, the standards for ingredients and preparation are incredibly strict. If a special dish doesn't satisfy the customer, the restaurant's reputation will suffer. Back to the story, while the two were eagerly anticipating a mistake to be made, Nabi didn't seem to care at all and cheerfully shouted, "I've got your order," and hurried off to the kitchen. Sungwoo, the restaurant's owner, opened the kitchen door, beaming as he said, "They want the special." "Huh? Got it." Then, putting on an apron, he entered the kitchen, thrilled, as it was rare for customers to request the special. Seeing Sungwoo's face and silhouette as he cooked, both restaurant owners were visibly impressed. The portly Park stared in awe, mesmerized by Sungwoo's form and technique, while the tall, skinny Oh turned to him and whispered, "What did you just say?" Park, however, remained silent, still entranced by the image of Sungwoo holding up a large pan effortlessly, his muscles flexing as he moved with seamless skill. It was a sight that looked almost like a painting. Annoyed, Oh finally shouted, "Mr. Park, I respect your taste, but have you forgotten why we're here?" This snapped Park back to reality, and he quickly stammered, No, I was just surprised by his skill." Then, he cleared his throat, trying to regain his composure, thinking, this restaurant owner really has a captivating presence. It's my first time seeing someone cooking with such passion and enjoyment. After showcasing his culinary expertise, Sungwoo placed 2 plates of special stir-fried squid rice in front of the guests. Each plate was beautifully divided, creating a yin-yang presentation with 1/2 rice and the other half stir-fried squid. Looking closely, they realized this dish was no ordinary creation. Knowing the restaurant's specials were made with only the freshest ingredients of the day, they realized finding any faults in the ingredients would be impossible. Now, their only option was to taste it and assess the flavor. Both took a spoonful and tried the dish. After the first bite, Oh quietly asked, "What do you think?" Park simply replied, It's good." Without another word, the two continued eating in silence, engrossed, spoonful after spoonful, until both plates were spotless. Finished with their meal, they leaned back in their chairs, patting their full stomachs and exclaiming, "That was delicious." Park praised, "The dish stays true to the basics. As Koreans, we can't deny this flavor." Oh, the cafe owner, nodded in agreement. His cafe and light food offerings like this are quite different from how we run things. Park also agreed, "Exactly, very different from my European-style cuisine." Both men happily pulled out money to pay, bid goodbye to Nabi the cat, and returned to their businesses in high spirits. As they walked, they chatted cheerfully, even suggesting they should visit often and bring gifts to the restaurant owner to build a good relationship. And so, Warrior's Restaurant turned 2 potential adversaries into good friends, thanks to Sungwoo's culinary skill. Meanwhile, the protagonist was engrossed in reading a piece of paper when Nabi curiously asked, "What's that?" Sungwoo handed the paper to Nabi, explaining that it was a blacklist sent by Hanghyuk, which included the names of the 2 guests they just served. Smiling proudly, Sungwoo remarked, "I defeated them with just a plate of stir-fried squid rice. Does that count as talent?" Nabi jumped up excitedly, replying, "The warrior is the best." Sungwoo patiently explained further, "But we also need to respect our neighbors. My strategy from the beginning has been to make this restaurant coexist peacefully with those around us, without affecting any other business. Living in harmony is very important in this world. No matter the circumstances, we must never forget the principles and spirit of a warrior." And with that, one of the guiding values of Warrior's Restaurant was established. 40 years ago in the world of Terra, which was 9 years ago in Earth time, Sungwoo was a gladiator slave standing in a grand circular arena that resembled an ancient Roman Colosseum. Sword in hand, he faced off against other warriors, taking them down one by one to the wild cheers of the crowd, who chanted for him to finish off his opponents. Only one other fighter remained, injured and lying on his back. Sungwoo stood over him, silent. The downed gladiator urged him, "Just end it." Sungwoo gripped his sword, raised it high, the blade angled downward, ice cold and unyielding. In one swift motion, he thrust his sword down, but not to strike a killing blow. Instead, He pierced his opponent's shoulder. The fallen gladiator looked up in shock. But Sungwoo simply gave him a faint smile and said, "I won't do it. I'm tired of this. We're nothing but slaves to war." The crowd erupted into jeers and threw stones at Sungwoo. But he remained calm, clutching his stomach, slowly sinking to his knees as he stared upward, seemingly longing for Earth, for his homeland. Despite the angry shouts and chaos filling the arena, all Sungwoo could think about was how much he wanted a bowl of kimchi stew. Back in the present, at the Warriors restaurant, Min had just finished a bowl of kimchi stew. He gently wiped his mouth and politely thanked Sungwoo, the owner, but it seemed Sungwoo was lost in his memories, oblivious to Min's words. It wasn't until Min waved his hand in front of Sungwoo's face and called out that he snapped back to reality, scratching his head in apology and explaining that he was just recalling the past. Min smiled and complimented the stew's taste. Meanwhile, Nabi, ever efficient, whisked away the empty bowl, balancing it on his head as he scampered back to the kitchen. Sungwoo, standing behind the counter, turned to Min. "This is your first time trying this, right?" Min returned a gentle smile, nodding. "I'm American, so I'm still getting used to kimchi," he said, taking the teacup Sungwoo handed him. Despite the soft rain outside, the atmosphere in the restaurant was peculiarly calm and cozy, enveloping the two men, and a cat, in an oddly peaceful warmth as they quietly sipped their drinks. "It's so peaceful and wonderful here," Min remarked. After finishing his tea, he stood up, thanked Sungwoo for the meal, and made to leave, but then he paused, recalling something, and turned back to remind Sungwoo that the municipal inspector would be coming soon. Erupos could handle greeting customers, but they'd need to verify that he posed no risk to the public. As he spoke, he sat down across from Nabi. Hearing this, Nabi thought, "I haven't harmed anyone, I even clean up really well." Sungwoo chuckled, explaining to Min that someone had previously come by to instruct him on how to apply for a returnee certification. Min laughed, patting Nabi on the head, and said, "Haha, they even have a guidebook for that. They're really trying to adapt to all the returnees." Sungwoo smiled back, nodding in agreement. A good way to handle things, he agreed. After that, Min left, but before stepping out completely, he cast a quick glance back at Sungwoo, who was tidying up behind the counter. Worry crossed his mind as he thought, the inspector coming this time is also a returnee. Let's hope there won't be any accidents. Later that evening, after Nabi had greeted the last of the day's guests, he happily swept the front patio, humming to himself as he held the broom. Suddenly, a middle-aged man with silver hair leaned down behind him and gently said, "Excuse me." Startled, Nabi jumped high, yelling, "Oh my god!" causing the man to blink in surprise at the cat's reaction. Nabi was furious. He swung his broom around as if he were about to attack the strange man. "Why did you suddenly appear like that?" he yelled. The middle-aged man was a bit startled. "I'm so sorry," he quickly apologized. "It's just a professional habit." "Are you scared?" "I was just surprised to see an Erupos here." Seeing the man apologize repeatedly, Nabi gradually calmed down. Curious, he asked, "How do you know about us?" And it was no wonder, because not everyone on Earth knew about the Erupos species. The silver-haired man nodded. "That's right, I used to be a warrior." At the word, warrior, Nabi's eyes lit up with excitement. He happily jumped up and down, excitedly saying, "Oh, really? A warrior? It's an honor to meet you." The man smiled and bent down to ask, "But, are you working now?" Hearing that question, Nabi wanted to call his boss to talk. But after a moment's thought, he decided that it was absolutely not a good idea to disturb his boss while he was enjoying his movie. So, Nabi turned to the man with a sad expression and said, "I'm sorry, the restaurant is closed." The man's face fell slightly. Seeing this, Nabi couldn't help but feel sorry. His eyes were watery, as if he were about to cry. Finally, with a kind heart, Nabi patted his chest and said loudly, "But if you're hungry, I'll cook you a meal personally, not as the restaurant." Hearing that, the man happily grabbed Nabi's paw and said gratefully, "An Erupos cooking? What an honor." Erupos were known for their cooking skills thanks to their unique characteristics. So Nabi was very confident, until the man asked him to cook kimchi soup. Nabi's face turned pale and his hands trembled. This dish was truly a big challenge for a cat like him. as kimchi was a dish from Earth, not from the land of Terra where he had lived. Nevertheless, Nabi tried his best. He ran to get a chair so he could reach the stove, and began to cut the meat, the basic ingredient for the dish, which included pork leg and kimchi. After the meat was cut and the kimchi was ready in 2 cups, Nabi carefully put the meat into the pot to start cooking the broth. By the way, if you want to cook broth from meat or bones, I have a little tip. When the water boils for the first time, the dirt will float to the surface. Let the water boil for about 5 to 10 minutes for the foam to rise. Then turn off the heat. Pour out the water and clean the pot, meat or bones. After adding new water and starting to cook the second time, the broth will be clear and no longer have a bad smell. When the water just boils, reduce the heat to the lowest level to simmer. It is best not to cover the pot when simmering for a long time. The water will be clear and naturally sweet. After putting the meat in the pot to make the broth, Nabi started thinking about the next step. However, he suddenly panicked when he realized he didn't know how to season the dish, as the necessary seasonings included fish sauce made from small shrimp, salt, and sugar, things he had never used before. Confused, Nabi decided to put everything in at once. After a lot of effort, he thought everything was probably okay, he just needed to add some vegetables later to finish. However, suddenly a thought crossed his mind and made Nabi jump. He felt like he had missed something, and decided to add onion to the soup, thinking that it couldn't be wrong. He pulled out a large onion to prepare for cooking. However, when cooking kimchi soup, people usually use green onions, not onions, so when Nabi brought the dish to the guest, he himself felt that something was wrong, disappointed for not being able to complete the dish as requested by the guest. He lay flat on the floor and groaned, "I think there's something wrong here." The middle-aged guest also looked at the soup and commented, "I feel the same way. Something's not right, because this is almost kimchi porridge, not kimchi soup, but anyway, you've tried your best." Hearing that, Nabi was somewhat comforted when the guest was not upset and started to eat. Just then, the kitchen door opened. Sungwoo, after watching his favorite movies, walked into the kitchen and was surprised to see a guest. He said, "You don't look like a customer. A friend?" Nabi, who was lying disappointed, curled up in the corner of the kitchen, groaned that this was a guest from Terra. The silver-haired guest stood up, apologized and introduced himself as a returnee. Looking at the guest more closely, Sungwoo noticed that his face was as hollow as Min's when he first arrived here. Perhaps he had suffered a lot while in Terra. Therefore, Sungwoo gently said, "I understand. You want to eat kimchi soup, right?" Hearing that, the guest quickly apologized and said he didn't want to bother, as the restaurant was closed. However, Sungwoo just smiled lightly, walked closer and said, "This restaurant is open whenever the owner wants, so I'll make this dish for you." Then, Sungwoo took the tray of food that Nabi had cooked and brought it into the kitchen. As he walked, he thought, "After all, this is the first meal of a returnee, so I must treat him well." With a confident look, Sungwoo rolled up his sleeves and prepared a special meal for someone in the same situation as him. Someone who had once been lost in another world and found his way back. When Sungwoo stepped into the kitchen, he got right to work preparing kimchi stew with the poise of a top chef, though in reality, he was just frying meat in an iron skillet. He took a cut of pork shoulder, the top tier of cheap but tasty meat, then began to chop it up and stir-fry it over high heat. As he flipped the pan with a speed and skill that looked like a reincarnated talent, Nabi, the little cat, peeked around the corner, his eyes wide with curiosity, as if he were watching a live performance. Before he could peek much longer, Sungwoo turned around with a sly smile. "Quit hiding. Come here, I'll show you how it's done." Nabi blinked in surprise but then bounced over. As excited as a kid with a new toy, Sungwoo started explaining each step. First, throw the meat in to sear. Then, add the kimchi to let its tangy, spicy flavor mix in with the meat. To keep the pork from smelling too strong, add some soybean paste, the miracle cure for people who can't handle alcohol. Nabi nodded thoughtfully. "So you add soybean paste so people who don't drink alcohol can eat it, right?" Sungwoo chuckled and nodded. "Exactly. For some who avoid alcohol, we use soybean paste instead. Plus, the garlic in the kimchi helps handle the meat's smell too." Nabi noted it down diligently, his eyes sparkling. Finally, Sungwoo added thin slices of green onion to the skillet, stirring everything together, and seasoned it with salt and a splash of shrimp sauce. He poured in some water and let it come to a rolling boil. Nabi, who was eagerly jotting down everything, marked the important parts with stars and finally jumped up with excitement, saying, "So that means I can make kimchi stew too now." Sungwoo just laughed, telling him to go ahead and give it a try next time. Soon, the meal was served, a pot of steaming kimchi stew, a sunny side-up egg, and a side of pork to go with some white rice. When the silver-haired customer saw the tray of food, he couldn't contain his surprise and muttered, "Huh, so I'm not the only one who misses this dish." "You too?" Sungwoo smiled and replied, "It's funny, I never missed it on Earth. But ever since coming to Terra, I can't stop thinking about kimchi stew." The customer nodded in sympathy, blinking back tears as he tasted the familiar flavors of home. It seemed like one of those rare moments when food could take you back to your childhood faster than any internet connection. After the meal, the customer started opening up, sharing that he'd lived in Terra for 13 years, which was about 6 years in the real world. Sungwoo sighed with a deep understanding because he'd been in Terra for 40 years already. Or roughly 9 Earth years. It seemed like there were no rules to this world-hopping business. It was like playing the cosmic lottery. Once he'd calmed down, the silver-haired customer proudly added that he was a level 51 hunter. Sungwoo was genuinely impressed, thinking, "Wow, that's no small feat, since level 51 was a respectable silver rank." Bordering on expert, the customer looked off into the distance, deep in thought. This place is nothing like Terra. The way they handle dimensional gates here is so strict that it makes me miss Terra even more. Sungwoo was stunned and asked, "So you didn't come back by choice?" The silver-haired man gave a wry smile, glanced over, and replied, "Not exactly. It was during a dungeon exploration that I got hit by an expulsion spell." This information left Sungwoo speechless. This customer hadn't returned the usual way. He'd been thrown back to Earth by some kind of dimensional magic. It was like winning the grand prize in a lottery no one actually wanted to play. Sungwoo chuckled, "Haha, well, aren't you lucky then?" The customer gave an embarrassed laugh. "Maybe, but for me, it wasn't such a lucky thing." The customer's eyes grew distant and sad, and Sungwoo, sensing the man's grief with the wisdom of a seasoned traveler, quickly realized that Terra had become his second home. The truth was, he had a wife and a pristine white Erupos cat he adored back there. Just thinking about that cozy little home, where his gentle wife and loyal cat waited, made this once fearsome warrior, who had braved Terra's fiercest battles, break down in tears, bawling like a child. Nabi, Sungwoo's little cat, was just as moved by the scene as he rummaged through his pouch, producing a tiny handkerchief and offering it to the tearful guest. Sungwoo sighed, glancing around with a weary expression. Having been single for so long, listening to people go on about family was hardly his favorite pastime. After a moment's thought, he boldly spoke up, "If you want to return to Terra that badly, I might be able to lend a hand." The silver-haired guest, mid-sob, immediately snapped his head up, eyes wide with disbelief, and Nabi's jaw practically hit the floor. After a second of stunned silence, the guest leapt to his feet, slamming his hands on the table with an echoing smack. "Are you serious? I'd go back in a heartbeat." Sungwoo gave a smug smile and snapped his fingers. In an instant, a dimensional gate crackled open beneath the guest's feet. Nabi's eyes went round as he watched in shock, and the guest had just enough time to blink in astonishment before Sungwoo, with a parting grin, said, "It was a pleasure meeting you," and, poof, the guest was gone, whisked back to Terra in the blink of an eye. Afterward, Sungwoo dusted off his hands with a casual air, though with a slight hint of irritation. "Honestly, I really hate it when people cry in front of me." Nabi, still a little shaky, started sweating as he murmured, You'd better be careful. Opening dimensional gates on a whim might make the goddess mad." But Sungwoo waved him off, looking bored as he picked at his ear. "He wanted to go back, so I sent him back. If the goddess shows up, I'll punch her or something." Nabi, face scrunched with worry, stammered, So you sent him back to Terra just because you were annoyed?" For the record, our main character here was powerful enough to take on the goddess herself if he felt like it. So she'd probably think twice before reprimanding him. Having finished his little customer support service, Sungwoo casually strolled toward the kitchen, telling Nabi to close up shop early since today had been busy enough. Nabi cheerfully went back to work, while Sungwoo decided to treat himself to a light meal. However, as soon as he sat down, preparing to dig in, Nabi shyly asked if he could take the plate of food down to feed the slime pudding in the basement. Sungwoo immediately clamped down on his food tray, flatly refusing. "No, I'm eating this." This left Nabi slightly disappointed, as he secretly thought his own cooking probably wasn't good enough, and he didn't want Sungwoo to suffer through it. But Sungwoo just chuckled, picked up the tray, and took a hearty bite, visibly pleased. Holding the spoon, Sungwoo couldn't help but recall the old days, back when he was a slave warrior trapped in Terra's dark dungeons. That was a time when all he had was darkness and no hope, until one day, a soldier appeared, clad in armor that looked like a Roman uniform, his smile as bright as the sun. The soldier introduced himself as John, a friendly guy who had come to offer Sungwoo a special tray of food, kimchi stew. Sungwoo stared in disbelief, caught between joy and surprise, and asked John where he had gotten it. John laughed heartily. "Everyone from your world says it's a must-have, so I bought it for 1 coin." Gleefully opening the lid, Sungwoo found himself staring into the pot with bewilderment. "This isn't kimchi stew. It's kimchi porridge." John scratched his head sheepishly, looking embarrassed. Is that so? Was I swindled?" But to Sungwoo, even kimchi porridge was as precious as gold. He smiled and thanked John, promising to eat plenty to keep his strength up. Sitting in that gloomy prison, Sungwoo savored each spoonful of kimchi porridge as if it were the finest delicacy in the world. Now, back in the present, he felt like he was tasting a bowl of that kimchi porridge all over again. Savoring the flavor, Sungwoo murmured to himself, "So it wasn't green onions but actually leeks. Now I get it." Eating with satisfaction, Sungwoo found himself reminiscing about those challenging days in Terra. If it weren't for kind souls like John, he might have turned into a cold-hearted warrior, driven only by fighting and bloodshed, instead of the man now sitting here munching contentedly. Meanwhile, somewhere on Terra, the silver-haired guest sat in a field of grass, bewildered, trying to make sense of why he'd been expelled back to Terra again. On a side note, although I've eaten plenty of kimchi stew, I've never had kimchi porridge. Maybe it's time to make a bowl like this and see what the difference is. The next day, at the wholesale market in District A, the air was bustling and loud. Practically a festival. Among the throng of people, we have Sungwoo and his assistant, Nabi, a graceful cat with a definite knack for picking good food. The two were munching and bickering, arguing over what to eat next. With a wise look, Nabi declared that they should finish the hot dogs first before deciding on anything else. Strolling leisurely and admiring the traditional stalls, Sungwoo couldn't help but sigh. Shopping at the market has a way better vibe than the supermarket. Don't you think, Nabi? There was something about this place that made him feel like a part of this simple life, where the smells and shouts of vendors filled the air. Just then, as he was lost in his admiration, Nabi's eyes suddenly lit up with an unmistakable sparkle, the look of a cat that's just found treasure. Nabi darted forward like an arrow, leaving Sungwoo with no choice but to follow his explorer companion. Soon enough, Nabi led him to a genuine treasure, a massive clam. Sungwoo's eyes went wide as he took in the sight, and it took him a while to remember where he'd seen one before. That's right, this was a Hera gigas clam, the type the Gigantes tribe used for entertainment. The surprises didn't stop there. Sungwoo turned to the stall owner to ask where the clam came from, and she proudly declared that her husband had picked it up. Picked up? Sungwoo thought to himself, seeing as this thing must weigh at least 200 kilos, fit for a giant to carry. And yet, she said her husband simply picked it up. Well, okay, she explained that her husband was a robust hunter, so maybe it did make sense? After some gawking and consideration, Sungwoo decided to buy the clam for his restaurant, despite the stall owner insisting it was only for display because nobody knew how to open it. Never mind that, he wanted it, so he was getting it. He also threw in an order for 10 mackerels. When asked why he was buying so many fish, Sungwoo scratched his head and said he was opening a restaurant, so he'd need the quantity. Hearing this, The stall owner promptly pointed a finger at him and shouted, "How are you going to open a restaurant with only 10 fish?" Before he could react, Sungwoo found the stall owner tossing various fish into his bag herself, leaving him a bit sheepish, while Nabi was practically bursting with joy, clapping his paws with a wildly satisfied look on his face. Fish is fish. No cat would turn that down. Back at the restaurant, Sungwoo placed the clam on the kitchen counter with an air of reverence, and Nabi sat nearby, gazing at the sea monster alongside him, wondering just how they'd handle it. After some careful calculation, Sungwoo braced himself, gently prying the clam open, only to be astounded by the sheer amount of meat inside. It was easily several times larger than Nabi. The scallop part was terrifyingly massive. "Sashimi is the only way," Sungwoo muttered with determination. He sliced thin, paper-like slices of meat, dipping them in Korean chili sauce. Taking a bite, his eyes lit up. This would be amazing with a shot of soju. With the clam's meat and remaining organs, Sungwoo enthusiastically set to prepare an authentic American clam chowder, promising instant hangover cure after tonight's sashimi and soju feast. That was the plan, but his eyes suddenly gleamed with a sinister sparkle as he noticed a small black pouch tucked within the clam. He grinned in satisfaction. "Now this here is a poison sac, the real deal for hunters. Whoever eats this and lives will have their poison resistance boosted to godly levels." His tone was confident, like he was hosting a special sale with a bonus offer, if you survived. Hearing this, Nabi's fur bristled, muttering to himself, "Master is truly scary." Sungwoo's face grew increasingly devious as he pondered how to cook and preserve this monstrous dish long-term, just in case any brave souls dared to try it. Meanwhile, somewhere far away, a hunter shuddered as if a ghost had just passed through him. Little did he know, a chef was currently plotting a gourmet specialty beyond his wildest imagination. Back in the kitchen, Sungwoo dove into his preparations when, suddenly, Min swung the door open and stepped into the restaurant, pulling out a chair to sit at the table. He asked what interesting thing they were up to. When caught sight of the colossal clam, Min couldn't hide his surprise and mentioned that this type of clam could be found near the river. The moment Min mentioned the river, Sungwoo set his knife down, turning around with interest. But Min's face turned serious as she recounted a recent story. Just 2 days ago, someone reported hearing a loud noise near the drainage pipes, and hunters found a small spatial crack right at that spot. As soon as he finished speaking, Sungwoo's expression turned dead serious. A spatial crack? Any day now, this place could become a portal, and all sorts of monsters could come pouring through. Upon hearing mention of the special task force, Sungwoo immediately understood the situation and realized why Hanghyuk hadn't been around the restaurant lately. While Sungwoo and Min continued exchanging information about the dimensional rift at the river, Nabi swiftly brought out an exquisitely arranged plate of scallop sashimi. Placing it on the table, Min picked up a slice, marveling, "Your knife skills are amazing. The sashimi is cut so thin you can see right through it." A quick side note here, not many chefs around the world can manage this. Thin yet perfectly even. When sliced this finely, the sweetness of the scallop truly shines. Only those fortunate enough to dine with a top chef can appreciate this level of precision. Though it doesn't come cheap, typically. Such chefs serve only one customer at a time. Back at the restaurant, Sungwoo suggested Min try dipping it in Korean chili paste or soy sauce with wasabi. But Min opted for plain soy sauce, saying he wasn't a fan of wasabi. As he reached for the soy sauce, Sungwoo's mind began to spin with complex issues, the dimensional rift, the people who have returned to Earth after crossing dimensions, and now the discovery of the giant Haragigas clam in the river. The Gigantes, a proud and extremely violent race with power levels surpassing 90, usually ate this type of clam. Could the rift this time be connected to them? But how could all these strange, seemingly random events keep occurring in succession? As he thought this through, Sungwoo broke into a cold sweat, wondering if he himself might be the cause of all this. It was possible, after all, someone with immense power, having crossed into another world, might unintentionally disrupt energy flows, creating temporal and spatial rifts. While Min was happily savoring the scallop sashimi, a tragic drama was unfolding in a cold, damp underground sewer nearby. Baek Hanghyuk, The big blonde kid with a knack for whining like a child was curled up in his sleeping bag, groaning pitifully. This sight did not escape the sharp gaze of his purple-haired assistant, who sighed, then suggested, "If you're too busy sulking to write your resignation letter, I'll be happy to draft it for you." Hang Hyuk was outraged, leaping up, but all he got was her frosty stare, which made him feel like he'd made the biggest mistake of his life. Wasting his day off, whining in a sewer. Tearfully, Hang Hyuk whimpered, "Is this what being first order is all about?" His assistant sighed in exasperation. Then what should the first order be doing? Instantly, Hang Hyuk leapt up, shedding his sleeping bag, and activated his superstar power. In a radiant glow as though he were on stage, he announced dramatically, "They should be battling monsters in epic style, broadcasting the whole thing live for everyone to witness. Naturally, I would be the hero admired by the entire world." Here's a bit of backstory. Hang Hyuk's power, superstar, boosts his strength according to the crowd's attention. This has only added to his delusions, making him always yearn to shine like a superstar. His dream? Nothing short of epic battles, superhero scenes, and hordes of fangirls swooning around him. His answer didn't cheer things up in the slightest and only made his assistant want to curse in her head. She coldly replied, "You could just quit this and join some reality show. You know." The words had barely left her mouth before Hang Hyuk's spirits dropped from Cloud 9 back to Earth, and he retreated into his sleeping bag, groaning like a child denied a candy bar. Despite her immense irritation with his attitude and personality, the assistant resumed her serious demeanor, continuing to monitor the spatial crack nearby. While observing, she had to admit he wasn't entirely wrong. They had no idea how long they'd be waiting here. So, she suggested they call in another team to take over so he could get some rest. But before she could finish, a deafening sound echoed through the space. The crack suddenly erupted, transforming into a full-blown portal of doom. This was a crisis. All nearby troops immediately scrambled to the site. Hang Hyuk sprang out of his sleeping bag, weapon at the ready, bracing for danger. Meanwhile, his assistant rushed to check the scanner to gauge the portal's level. But when she looked, she gasped in horror. The scanner had cracked. What did that mean? It meant the portal was beyond S-class, a gate of destruction, an apocalyptic threat they had no chance of handling. She collapsed to her knees, trembling in terror, understanding that the entire city could be erased without a trace. Around her, people were also beginning to grasp the situation, a wave of panic spreading. Just then, a hand gently rested on her shoulder. Hang Hyuk, with a determined gaze and voice full of resolve, said someone needed to enter the portal before it fully opened. Flashing a confident smile, he proposed an emergency course of action under Article A Section 43. Subsection 1 of the Criminal Law Act, Oops. Anti-Portal Regulation Act, to use a stabilizing device to contain the portal's expansion until reinforcements could arrive. He assured everyone that they just needed to hold it off temporarily. The purple-haired assistant quickly tried to stop him, suggesting that attacking together might be more effective, but Hang Hyuk waved her off, saying if Min were here, teamwork would work, but otherwise, the others would only get in his way. Placing both hands on her shoulders, Hang Hyuk declared he'd take the stabilizer device and enter the portal alone to buy them time. He firmly instructed her to head to the city outskirts, to Chongjeonggung Road, and find a restaurant named Warrior. She was to report the situation to the restaurant's owner and bring them back as quickly as possible. To the assistant's surprise, Hang Hyuk smiled confidently, adding, "Just mention my name and beg him to help. If everyone wants to live, that's the only way." Then, Hang Hyuk's face turned as serious as a real officer, ordering, "Go now, this is an order." Understanding the situation, the assistant stood at attention, saluted in military style, shouted, "Yes," and immediately ran off. Meanwhile, Hang Hyuk took a cigarette from his pocket and tried to light it. But his hands began to tremble so much that the cigarette fell to the ground before he could even light it. It turned out that all the brave and strong act was just an outward appearance to encourage the assistant. Because deep down, he was terrified too. Who wouldn't be afraid of death when facing the catastrophe of a dimensional rift? Surprisingly, a soldier nearby pulled out a pack of cigarettes and offered one to him. Praising, "Back Hang Hyuk, you're so cool today." Hearing the compliment, the kid calmed down a bit and chuckled. asking, "Are you guys filming?" The soldiers laughed and confirmed it. This statement unexpectedly activated Hang Hyuk's superstar skill. His face immediately turned as serious as a born warrior. He raised his hand to light a lighter, put the cigarette in his mouth and started smoking. Then, he told the soldiers that they just needed to take down the monsters that jumped out of the dimensional rift. Meanwhile, holding the stabilization device, a rather clunky-looking machine, he jumped into the dimensional rift. A fierce battle immediately erupted. The soldiers continuously fired at dozens of bat-like and giant reptile-like monsters charging towards them. Among them, a red monster, resembling a prehistoric dinosaur, with glowing red eyes, was charging straight at them. The soldiers kept firing, but they couldn't reload their magazines fast enough. At that moment, a dark shadow appeared right in front of them. The giant red monster approached, raised a huge foot, ready to smash down on the soldier who no longer had the ability to resist. He could only close his eyes and wait for Hades to call his name. But no, a sword was suddenly drawn, and with just one gentle stroke, our protagonist, Sungwoo, had arrived. Appearing like a warrior god, he swung his sword, cutting the red monster in half. Then, Sungwoo calmly sheathed his sword, ignoring the fact that the bright red monster had been chopped into hundreds of pieces. Everyone around was simply stunned. It seemed that these monsters were not worth Sungwoo's time. He did everything as if he were cutting lettuce, causing the soldiers to be unable to believe their eyes. At that moment, a drop of blood flew towards Hang Hyuk, but he gently raised his sword to swat it away. With his divine power, the portal problem would be solved by Sungwoo in the blink of an eye.